Reading English stories is hands down the best way to pick up English. As you go through each chapter, I'll break down some new words for you. Start with Chapter 0, linked in the description. Volume 1, Chapter 3a, Magic Textbook. About 2 years has passed since I was reincarnated. Have you heard of the term reincarnate before? Reincarnate is like a fancy way of saying that someone or something is born again in a new body or form after they've passed away. It's kind of like hitting the reset button on life and starting fresh in a new body or being. For instance, in some beliefs, people think that when you die, you might come back as a totally different person or even an animal. So if you were once a wise old owl, you could reincarnate as a playful puppy in your next go-around. My legs and waist were starting to become strong enough for me to walk on my feet, and I was beginning to learn this world's language. Having decided to live on seriously, I started to consider what I could do. What did I need in my life? Studying, sports, and skill set. As a baby, there was little I could do. The most I could do was to bury my face into someone's chest. And when I did that to the maid, she made an unhappy expression. That maid definitely hated kids. Realizing that I can do sports a little later in life, I started searching for books in the house to learn words for. It's important to be literate. There's a near 100% literacy rate amongst Japanese, but many had poor English skills, so they balked at the idea of going overseas and even treated foreign languages as a mere skill set. Therefore, learning this world's words was my first assignment. There were 5 books in this house. Could it be that books in this world are expensive, or that Paul and Zenith don't read books? It was probably both these reasons. It was unbelievable to me, who owned thousands of books, though they're all light novels. There were only 5 books, but they were sufficient for me to learn to recognize words. This world's language was similar to Japanese, so it was easy for me to pick up. Even though the letters were completely different, learning how to speak went very smoothly. I'll be fine as long as I memorize enough vocabulary. It's beneficial to first understand how to speak. Father read me the contents of the books many times, so learning the vocabulary went smoothly. Perhaps it had something to do with this body's ability to memorize well. After being able to read the language, I found this book's content very interesting. In my past life, I never thought of learning as interesting. Thinking back about it, it was exactly the same as memorizing information from the internet. How can it not be interesting? Nevertheless, did my father really think an infant would be able to understand the contents of that book? It was fine for me, but any normal 1-year-old kid would have frowned and started bawling. These were the 5 books at home, traveling around the world. This is a guidebook that contains the name and unique characteristics of various countries in this world. Fidoa's monsters, ecology and weaknesses. A book that described the monsters that appeared in the Fidoa region and ways to handle them. Guide to Magic. A guidebook that explained how to use magic attacks, from the elementary rank to the advanced rank. Perugius's Legend. Fairy tale about a summoner named Perugius, who traveled along with his companions, battling the demon gods, saving the world, punishing evil, and rewarding the good. 3 Swordsmen and the Labyrinth. It's the adventure of 3 talented swordsmen of different sword styles who encountered each other and entered the labyrinth. Leaving aside the 2 battle novels, the other 3 let me learn a lot, especially the guidebook about magic. To me, who came from a world without magic, the things recorded here got me really interested. Reading through it, I understood a few basics. 1. First of all, magic can be broadly classified into 3 categories. Attack magic. Attacks a target. Healing magic. Heals a target. Summoning magic. Calls out something. 3 types. Easy to understand. There are various functions, but according to the guidebook, magic was originally developed for war. It still isn't really used much besides battle and hunting. Number 2. To use magic, you must have mana. Have you heard of the term mana before? Mana is like the energy or power-up juice that characters in games or stories use to do magical things. It's like their special fuel for casting spells or performing supernatural actions. For example, in a video game, a wizard might need mana to shoot fireballs or summon lightning bolts. It's like their magical fuel that lets them pull off all their magical tricks. Versely, As long as you have mana, you could use magic. There are two ways of using mana. Use the mana within your body. Draw out mana from something that contains mana. Must be one of these two. I can't think of a good example. It's probably something like a home generator for the former and a battery for the latter. A long time ago, people used only their mana to use magic. As generations passed, magic was researched into, the difficulty spiked, and the mana required increased exponentially as a result. This was fine for the people who had a lot of mana, but those with lesser mana couldn't use that sort of magic. Thus, the magicians of the past thought of ways to draw out mana from elsewhere to fulfill the magic's requirements. Number 3. There are two ways to activate magic. Incantation magic array. Have you heard of the term incantation before? Incantation is like saying a special magic phrase or words to make something happen. It's like a spell or chant that people use in stories or rituals to create a magical effect. For example, in a fairy tale, a wizard might say abracadabra as an incantation to make something disappear. It's like using a secret code or special words to trigger a magical event. Have you heard of the term magic array before? In magic lingo, an array is basically like a setup or arrangement of magical elements that help make spells more potent. It's like organizing your mystical tools in a particular way to give your magic an extra oomph. For example, picture a witch laying out different colored stones in a circle before casting a spell. Each stone's placement in the circle forms an array that enhances the magical energy she's working with, kind of like a power-boosting formation for her spells. There's really no need to explain here, right? To activate a spell, either to utter a chant through the mouth or draw a magic array. Magic arrays were the norm a very long time ago, but incantation is currently the mainstream. In the distant past, the simplest incantation required about 1-2 minutes. It wasn't very long, but this method was very difficult to use in battle. In contrast, once a magic array was drawn, it could be used repeatedly. There was a certain magician who successfully reduced the incantation time. Thus, incantation became the norm. The simplest incantations took about 5 seconds, so basic magic attacks could be used with incantation. But unless the situation was urgent, complicated magic spells are still cast with magic arrays. 4. A person's mana is set when they are born. A normal RPG increased your MP as you level up. But this doesn't look the case in this world. Basically, everyone's a warrior by profession. Just saying that term makes me feel like there was something of a change. What about me? Apparently, the amount of mana one possessed was hereditary. The fact that my mother was capable of magic meant I could probably hope for a certain amount of innate mana. It's a little worrying. Even if my parents are talented, I don't think my genetic makeup is capable of that. In any case, I began to try out the simplest magic. The guidebook contained methods for both incantation and magic formation, but since incantation's the norm, and there's no place for me to draw magic arrays, I started with incantation. It seems that the more complicated a spell was, the longer the incantation time would be. In fact, extremely complicated spells had to be chanted in conjunction with magic arrays. That's not a problem in the beginning, however. Seems a skilled magician can use magic without incantation, voiceless incantation, or reducing the chants. Something like that. But why was it that a skilled person didn't need incantation? The amount of mana required to cast the technique doesn't change, and even if you level up, your MP won't increase either? Or was it the more skilled you are, the less mana you'd use? No, even if that does decrease one's mana usage, there's no reason to skip steps. Whatever, I'll just try it out first. I hold the guidebook in my left hand, stretched out my right, and read out the words. Bestow the protection of water on the place thee demandest, let thine crystal clear flow here. Water ball. I felt the sensation of blood gathering in my right hand. My blood feels as if it's being squeezed out. A water bullet the size of a fist appeared in front of my right hand. Whoa! The moment I showed amazement, the water bullet fell onto the floor, dampening it. The book said the water bullet should be shot out, but it had fallen instead. Perhaps my concentration had been broken, causing the spell to fail. Concentrate, concentrate. A sensation of blood gathering in my right hand. This feeling, I once again raise my right hand, recall that feeling from before, and imagine it in my mind. I don't know how much mana I have, but it's best not to think that I can do this many times. Concentrate, and let every attempt be successful. First, I had to imagine it, then repeat it over and over in my mind, then cast it in reality. If it ended in failure, I'll imagine it again in my mind, until I can do it perfectly in my head. This was how I practiced every move in fighting games in the past. Because of that, I didn't really fail when I tried to execute a combo. I should have no problems if I practice using this method. I hope. A deep breath. I send the blood flowing from my toes and top of my head into my right hand, using that feeling to gather power, and then have the feeling of firing it out from my palm. Carefully, with every heartbeat, gathering it bit by bit. Water, 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 water bullet, water's ball, water ball, water ball. Evil thoughts were mixed into it. One more time. Concentrate, squeezing out water. Ha! I unconsciously shouted like a monk, and the water bullet came out. Plop. The moment I showed surprise, the water bullet fell way too quickly. I didn't chant just now, right? What I did was to recall the feeling of using that spell and imitating it in my mind. Can it be that just redoing the flow of the magic made incantation unnecessary? Was voiceless incantation that simple? Wasn't it supposed to be an upper-class technique? If it's that easy to succeed, what's the use of incantation? Even a novice like me can cast magic using voiceless incantation. Concentrating the mana in my fingertip and determining the shape in my mind. That was bashfully it. In that case, incantation was completely unnecessary. Everyone can just do this instead. Can it be that incantation's the activation of magic? There's no need to replicate the feeling of gathering blood. I can just complete it if I let out my voice. It might be something like that. It's just like an automatic car. One can actually change it to manual and it'll still work. Incantation will automatically cast magic. There'll be several advantages to using incantation. Firstly, it's easy. Instead of explaining it as gathering the blood from the blood vessels in my body, everyone can simply recite it and succeed instead. Both teacher and student will have an easier time. And after teaching this over and over again, it'll become incantation is something quintessential. Secondly, it's convenient to use. Needless to say, attack magic's meant to be used in combat. Instead of closing your eyes and going, while concentrating, it's faster to recite it quickly. It's a question of which is easier, to run with all of one's strength while drawing a clear picture, or to run with all of one's strength while chanting. It must be different for various people. Maybe there are those who would find it easier with the former. I quickly flipped through the magic textbook, but I found nothing on voiceless incantations. That's weird. Based on my experience, it wasn't that hard. After each chapter, I'll run through the previous vocab again for you. If you forget any, just check the description for the meanings. Reincarnate, mana. Incantation, magic array. Calamitous, concubine.
Protégé.
Amniotic, arrogant. Perspective, chanting. Placate. If you dive into English stories and pick up some words daily, you're definitely making progress. Nice work. Keep it going.